Assalamu alaikum. This is gonna be a short one. A while back, I made a video showing how David Wood claimed to be against disrespecting the Quran, until suddenly he was perfectly okay with doing this. At the time I made it, I was unaware of the tweet from Hijab that drove him to do that. It was a very vicious response to Mrs. Apostate Prophet and an unbearably stupid comment she made. He took a screenshot of it and replied to it. This is what he said. When these anti-Muslim attention whore Islamophobes need to get on their knees in intellectual submission before they are whipped by freedom of speech by the Twitter Muslims, and they reluctantly open their mouth in protestation to find that they have been defiled by truth. Strong language, I know. Personally, I wouldn't have responded this way, mainly due to the emotional outrage that has come from this. You're probably wondering why on earth someone would use this as a justification to chew up the Quran, spit it out, and talk about buying the domain pissonthequran.com. Well, I'll let David Wood explain it for us.
As an example, Muhammad Hijab recently started insulting the wives of critics of Islam. He's been targeting women with mockery and abuse. He's even been using imagery of torture and rape when insulting women and suggesting that deep down, some of them actually want to be subjugated and raped by Muslim conquerors.
You got that? David sees this tweet as an abusive, torturous rape threat. Crazy, right? Only someone as desperate as Dovid-19 would read rape and torture into this. So since people who are brainwashed by him are so determined to prove this idea, let's go through the tweet and break it down. When these anti-Muslim attention whore Islamophobes. Now, David didn't put a red circle around this one, maybe because even he isn't dumb enough to misunderstand what attention whore means. However, enough people have pointed it out to me as sexual abuse that I felt obligated to debunk it. The next part is where things get interesting. Need to get on their knees in intellectual submission. This part is incredibly deceptive. David highlights the get on their knees and submission part so that whoever reads this will only take those words away from this. I have seen that many of his Christian audience have done exactly that. They read it as need to get on their knees in submission. This blatantly ignores the word intellectual there. He isn't telling you that they need to get on their knees and... which is why he puts the word intellectual there. Get on your knees in intellectual submission, i.e., admit that you don't know what you're talking about and submit to someone smarter than you to educate you. If David did this 15 years ago, we wouldn't be here. Honestly, only someone with a mind like David would read this in a sexual way, before they are whipped by freedom of speech by the Twitter Muslims. The desperation here, man, wow. You literally only circle the part that says whipped, as if to imply that Muhammad Hijab wants to whip her, literally. How about you keep reading, David? You might learn a thing or two about idioms. It says, before they are whipped by freedom of speech by the Twitter Muslims. This is no different from telling someone, I'm gonna beat you in Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3. I totally will, by the way. They aren't actually going to beat up their physical body. They just mean that they will win. Similarly, Hijab puts a caveat here by saying that these people will be whipped by what? Not by a whip, or a belt, or a lightsaber. By freedom of speech. Can freedom of speech hurt anyone? Not physically. Basically, people like you would be whipped by the very Muslims you're irritating with your garbage content consisting of things that have been refuted ad nauseum constantly by the very freedom of speech you so desperately worship. He is not saying that you will be whipped in any literal sense. How pathetic of you to read that in such a way. And they reluctantly open their mouth in protestation to find that they have been defiled by truth. Oh boy, my favorite part. He literally says open their mouth in protestation. Do you know what protestation is? I'm sure someone like you has all the time in the world to Google words he clearly doesn't know, right? Protestation is the act of protesting. A solemn declaration or avowal. Yes, folks, Muhammad Hijab is literally saying, and they reluctantly open their mouth to protest. And David somehow reads this as, and they reluctantly open their mouth to do something sexual. What the hell? Again, only someone with a mind like David's would concoct a reading like this. Oh, but I really like how he deceptively reads the last part. To find that they have been defiled by truth. Now, any normal person would read this as, they have been defiled by truth, i.e., humiliated by the truth, debunked, refuted, rebutted. How does David read this? Well, he circles defiled, and seeing how he singled out specific words in this tweet like this, he seems to think that defiled must have some kind of sexual connotation. But do I really need to point this out? For God's sake, it says defiled by truth, not defiled by this massive... How is it possible to be this desperate? Now, I'll be the first to admit that if I were him, especially because of the amount of people following me, I wouldn't have chosen my words in this fashion for two reasons. One, you have to be professional. Many people are watching you, they receive dawah and nasiha from you, and they're influenced by you. If you want to or have to deal with an annoying Islamophobe like Mrs. Apus, you don't have to do it with such strong language. Even being sarcastic or snarky would have been better than saying things like this, especially when you influence others to do the same. Second, and most importantly, we don't live in a world where our enemies have even the slightest amount of honesty. Look at how this bona fide genius read sexual abuse and torture into this tweet. He didn't have to copy and paste a few words here and there, and he sure didn't accurately represent it. All he had to do to fool his gullible audience was to circle the words in there which could be misunderstood, and boom! It worked like a charm. Now everyone is so blinded by this guy that they literally read those words and force sexual abuse into the tweet without reading the whole thing for what it is. You probably wouldn't think that it's even possible to have someone be this hopelessly brainwashed. But it is. It totally is. They read the entire tweet through the lens of these words. It is truly a tragedy, but it's the reality of the world we live in. And herein lies the problem. You see, David doesn't need to take statements out of context to get his agenda going. He just has to single out a few choice of words, and just like that, everyone's reading this the wrong way. All Muhammad Hijab had to do to get out of the situation was pick synonyms for different things he said. Then, suddenly, David's Rule 34 reading wouldn't have worked here. These people are professional scumbags. They look for ways to defile our reputation, even if we don't give them anything to work with. But you, Brother Hijab, gave them a lot to work with. I don't care if it exposes fools like David to do foolish things like this. We already knew he was a fool. He has more than 15 years worth of content to prove it. Doing things like this only gives him fuel to convince his audience that we're demons. And since we're trying to save his audience from a demon, we don't need this. When things like this happen, not only does David Wood horribly and dishonestly read what's being said, he then uses this to justify an even worse crusade. Check out the following clip from a video of his. He reads Quran chapter 6 verse 108, and after spending the bulk of the video misunderstanding an explanation from a scholar, in the wider context of the situation, he then goes on a long tirade giving us his bogus declaration of war.
Is there something you can do to make people like Hijab stop insulting and harassing women? Absolutely. The Quran says that if Muhammad Hijab's insults and abuse are going to cause people to insult Allah, he's supposed to stop. So all you would need to do is insult Allah and the Quran until Muhammad Hijab finally decides to obey the Quran. But Westerners, especially Christians, have become so obsessed with not offending people, and with not hurting people's feelings, and with not insulting others, that they wouldn't dream of implementing Surah 6, verse 108. They wouldn't dream of saying, hey, you stop this or I'm going to insult your God and your book. They won't insult someone's God or prophet or book, even if it's to protect women from a campaign of harassment and abuse, and even if the religion in question basically holds up a sign and says, hey, if you want us to stop doing something, just insult our God, our prophet, and our book, and we'll stop. And for the life of me, I can't understand this. I understand not wanting to be a jerk and not wanting to needlessly offend people. I understand that sort of thing. I don't understand being so opposed to causing offense that you won't even stand up for your wives and for women in general when someone announces that he's putting together an online army to harass and abuse and bully women. That I don't get. If you tell me you're starting a campaign of abuse targeting women, and I know there's a non-violent way to make you stop, I'm going to make you stop, even if it's something that will hurt your feelings. If your religion offers me a way to make you stop, I'm going to use it against you, even if you find it offensive. So, in the coming weeks, as I explore different ways of insulting the Quran, Some of you won't understand why I'm doing it. And you're going to send me messages saying, David, why are you stooping to this level? But before you ask me, David, why are you stooping to this level? Let me ask you in advance. What level do you think I'm stooping to? The level of defending women from abusive men? That's not a level I'm stooping to. That's a level I'm never going to retreat from. And if I have to mutilate 1,000 lifeless Qurans in order to protect women from a Muslim apologist's threats of rape and torture, get ready to see what a creative genius I am.
You see this? Do you see this? He's using Muhammad Hijab's words as a justification to go on a non-stop smear campaign against the religion. As if he hasn't done enough of that already. Fools like this are looking for reasons to do it. They also seem to forget that they've been doing quite a bit of that. The last thing we need is to give them material that they can show their audience to make it look like they have a just cause for doing it. Also, as much as I hate David Wood having an income doing this, the last thing that would help anyone is campaigning people to create accounts in order to mass flag his Patreon.
These guys are Islamophobes, and obviously they desecrated the Quran last week. Well, the call to action here is very straightforward. We're going to go to Patreon, okay? We're going to go to Patreon, we're going to make an account, and then when we make an account, we're going to mass report, both of their channels.
For one, if YouTube hasn't gotten rid of him yet, I doubt Patreon will. David can still make money through super chats in his 5 or so live streams he does a week. People will just turn him into a martyr. They're not gonna exactly see the error in his ways. They're just gonna whine about how America is out to get him. And we don't live in a world where this is considered abusive and a reason to get banned from Patreon. Announcing a mass war on his account is only gonna make you look like the abuser. Besides, this is David Wood we're talking about. He can easily bounce back from losing one source of income, even if it was gone for good. You guys want to defeat David Wood? It's not hard, I'm telling you. Simply do what Farid and many others are doing. Just make videos refuting all of his garbage content. And when there are so many of them of such high quality, he won't be able to deal with it. And just like Farid's stuff, he will continue to ignore it out of desperation, to cling to this Islamic boogeyman he so desperately needs his audience to believe in. Insha'Allah, it'll only be a matter of time before his echo chamber is destroyed. He won't be able to ignore it anymore, and the world will see him for what he really is.
A racist, Islamophobic, hate-mongering bigot.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.